We should have 19 participants this morning joining us, along with our moderator, Associate Dean Professor Krauss Phelan, and Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Elizabeth Clement. So thank you for joining us for Law Day 2023. And we will be doing some question and answer later. So if you are a participant and would like to post a question in the chat, you're welcome to do that throughout the webinar, and then we will take those and we will pose those later in the hour. So at this point, I'm going to stop my video and turn it over to Associate Dean Krauss Phelan, and we will get started.
Thank you, Bill, and welcome everyone. Law Day is held annually on May 1st, and it's a national day set aside to celebrate the rule of law. It provides us with an opportunity to understand how law and the legal process protect our liberty, strive to achieve justice, and contribute to the freedoms that all Americans share. Back in 1957, the president then of the American Bar Association, Charles Rhine, envisioned that we would have a special day like this to celebrate our legal system. And in 1958, President Dwight Eisenhower established Law Day as a day of national dedication to the principles of government under law. And in 1961, Congress designated May 1st as the official date for celebrating Law Day in our country. This program continues today and has grown to go across many countries around the globe. And every year, a theme is chosen to spotlight the particular aspect of law and the legal process and its impact on each of our daily lives. This year's theme is Cornerstone of Democracy, Civics, Civility, and Collaboration. And to lead us in discussing this very important theme today is Chief Justice Elizabeth Clement. Chief Justice Clement joined the Michigan Supreme Court in November 2017 and became Chief Justice in November of 22. Justice Clement serves as chair of the Michigan Judicial Council and on the Governor's Task Force on Juvenile Justice. She previously has served as the court's co-liaison to the State Court Administrative Office, Department of Child Welfare Services, liaison to the 203 problem-solving courts in the state of Michigan, and to the Michigan Judicial Institute. Prior to her election to the court, Justice Clement served as chief legal counsel in the executive branch, advising on a wide variety of legal, legislative, and policy matters. She previously held the positions of Cabinet Secretary and Deputy Chief of Staff, as well as Deputy Legal Counsel in the Governor's Office. Justice Clement served as legal counsel to the Michigan Senate in 2010 and as legal advisor from 2006 to 2010 in the Senate Majority Policy Office. She began her legal career in private practice representing individuals in the areas of family law, adoption, probate, estate planning, and criminal law. She graduated from Michigan State University and Michigan State University College of Law. Chief Justice Clement lives with her husband and children in East Lansing. And without further ado, Justice Clement, I would like to turn the floor to you to discuss with us today the theme of civics, civility, and collaboration as the cornerstone of our democracy. Justice Clement.
Well, thank you. And it's so good to be here today celebrating Law Day, which is a very important day for us at the court and throughout the courts in the state of Michigan. I think it's important to start by talking about the three cornerstones and the theme this year: civics, civility, and collaboration. And honestly, any one of these individual topics could be the theme of Law Day. But I love that they brought all three of them together because I think when you're talking about democracy, these are the three pillars, the foundation, if you will. And I'm going to start by talking about civics. The definition of civics is the study of the rights and duties of citizenship. So to me, this applies to how we inform and educate Michigan residents about their constitutional rights, as well as the resources courts have to offer for everyone that interacts with the judiciary, and the duties and responsibilities that go along with those rights. Thinking about the responsibilities of the people, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor sounded the alarm over the need for civic education. 2 decades ago, she said, 2/3 of Americans can name a judge on American Idol, and only 15% can name the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Civic knowledge can't be handed down the gene pool. It has to be learned. And really, that's why Law Day is so important, to remind all of us that responsibilities go with rights. You know, and I think it's interesting because when I talk to other than law schools, when I talk to undergrad students or high school students and talking about civics, we learn about government and civics throughout our education in the United States. We learn about it sometimes in 4th or 5th grade. We learn it again in 7th or 8th grade, and then in high school. But it's fascinating to me talking to young people, and sometimes even people that have been part of our process for many years, that that don't have a true understanding of how our government is formed through our Constitution, our United States Constitution and our state constitution, and don't have a full understanding of why we have 3 branches of government. Today, I'm only going to be talking about our branch of government, the judicial branch, and thinking about trial courts and their responsibilities. Us at the Michigan Supreme Court and our principles for the judiciary are very important to us, and it starts with independence, and that's because the people want courts that are independent and judges who make decisions solely based on the law, and that basic principle must always be first and foremost. Second, we are really focused on transparency. The people have a right to see inside our courts and get information they need to drive decision making. Next is accountability and efficiency. So we must be prudent stewards of public resources, and litigants should be able to get their business done in a reasonable amount of time. Next is accessibility. Whether real or virtual, doors to our courts must be open, whether people have lawyers or not. Innovation and data. The people have a right to know what's going on in their local courts, and that's why we need data collection and sharing systems that is a model for the nation. So innovation, especially in regards to collecting, analyzing, and visualizing data, is the key to achieving our goals. And last, and certainly not least, is working for everyone. People come to court on the most difficult days of their lives. They deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. Courts must be a place where communities can seek solutions and find healing. So a few examples of how we are focused on civics. We have a Justice for All Commission that is focused on access to Michigan's civil justice system. One of my colleagues, Justice Brian Zara, is the chair of that commission. And they are focused on important research to help guide decision making. And what they have found is that we have a social return on investment in civil legal aid of 669%. So for every dollar that's invested, we're seeing a 669% return. And then debt collection cases in Michigan are flooding the courts, and we're looking at potential rule changes that could help make that system simpler to navigate. And we're also expanding the number of self-help centers with a $500,000 grant program. And the goal is to work to simplify processes and court forms. In the future, the Justice for All Commission is planning on launching pilot projects, experimenting with different models of delivery, access, and making courthouses more welcoming to everyone. That involves training and engagement of all of our community leaders, and also, just as importantly, outreach to the public about the availability of resources and solutions for civil legal issues they're facing. We're also focused on technology improvements to boost efficiency. So our goal is to expand our statewide e-filing infrastructure and integrating more courts as quickly as possible. And why this is important is because it saves time and money for both the courts and then everyone that is using the courts. And we're going to have a plan of having email and text reminders for the public, very similar to what you get if you're going to the dentist and you have a reminder that you've got an appointment. We're going to utilize that same type of technology to make sure that the public knows when they have an appointment or a court date. And we're also expanding our data analytics. So that will be dashboards that are available to the public to look at. They can look at their specific court. They could look at the courts around the state of Michigan and look at the caseload information and gather information to help them understand how the courts are working, where they're working well, and where we need to make improvements. And as it was mentioned, I previously served as the liaison to our problem-solving courts around Michigan. And if you're not familiar with what problem-solving courts are, these are programs designed to really get at the root of the problem of why individuals continue to interact with the justice system. And we have more than 200 problem-solving courts around the state of Michigan that focus on mental health, drug and sobriety, dependency, and veteran issues. We call them problem-solving courts because really as I said, what we're after is what is the root cause? You know, what is the reason that someone has come into the criminal justice system? And we've seen that using treatment courts have a positive impact in changing the cycle of addiction and addressing other special needs, such as mental health issues. So at the State Court Administrative Office, we provide resources, funding, and training for all of those courts. And what we have seen, and we track all of this to share with the public and with the legislature, we see lower recidivism rates, which result in safer communities, and lower unemployment rates, which lead to stronger individuals and stronger families. And we know that model works, and we're trying to use this problem-solving court model in everything that we do at the court system. When we look at civility, civility is defined as a formal politeness or courtesy, treating one another with dignity and respect. For me, this applies to every aspect of court operations, because courts always need to focus on treating the people we serve with dignity and respect. People come to court on the most difficult days of their lives. They deserve not just a fair playing field, but one where they are welcomed, valued, and supported. And I really feel that civility in the judiciary starts at the very top. And I can tell you, 15 years ago, the Michigan Supreme Court did not have the best reputation as far as civility. There was a lot of infighting on the court. You saw that in the opinions and the official orders that came out of the court. It set a very bad example for our trial courts and practitioners around the state and for the public. We have worked very, very hard to improve the civility, not just on our court, but in all of the courts around the state of Michigan. One of the things that we're doing to really focus on that is to focus on treating people with dignity and respect. And we have a DEI commission, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And our goal is a judiciary that looks more like Michigan. Our leaders for that is my colleague, Justice Elizabeth Welch, and retired Court of Appeals Judge Cynthia Stevens. They are in the process of developing policies and standards to promote DEI, to help to eliminate disparities within the justice system, to assist local courts with implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion plans, and develop strategic plans and establish work groups to address key issues. In addition, helping people get tools to resolve disputes discreetly and outside of court through online dispute resolution is another way of engaging in civility by showing people a different and more productive way, not to mention a less time-consuming and costly way of handling disputes. We have what we call the MI Resolve, which is a free online service available statewide for money disputes, minor landlord-tenant matters like the return of a damaged deposit, contract matters, and neighborhood disputes. And we recently just expanded that to help divorced parents resolve issues related to parenting time, which we have found using this alternative method, in addition to reducing time and cost, it helps keep that civility in what we know is often a very emotional and very complex process with divorced parents, trying to figure out parenting time and resolve issues related to their children. When we talk about collaboration, I look at collaboration as the act of working together to create something, or working together towards a common purpose. And when you think of the first two foundational pieces, yes, you need to have an understanding of civics, and you need to have an appreciation for it. And civility is a key piece of that, as far as how you're interacting with others. But if you're not collaborating with those other partners, you're not going to be as successful. And with the judiciary, we definitely know how to lead, but we also understand that we accomplish so much more when we collaborate with stakeholders. So some great examples of what we're doing and what we're working hard on start with our Michigan Judicial Council. I have the privilege of serving as the chair of that. And our goal is to develop and implement a statewide judicial strategic plan and a unified vision for the future of the judiciary. So for the first time ever, a wide range of judicial stakeholders have a seat at the table to develop a long-term vision and strategic plan for the judiciary. So instead of just the 7 Michigan Supreme Court justices sitting together and trying to figure out what that long-term vision is, we've pulled together stakeholders from the entire judicial realm. And that includes stakeholders from the public, individuals that interact with the judiciary. We have developed and are working on implementing uniform statewide data collection methods and guidelines for how data is shared. We are focused on making the courts more understandable and user-friendly for everyone that uses them. And we're focused on enhancing and expanding educational and other resources so users are able to access and conduct business successfully with courts, either in person or virtually. Just last summer, the governor's task force on juvenile justice reform finished a year-long, very intensive work to look at juvenile justice in the state of Michigan. Our goal was to establish changes in state law, policy, and appropriations to improve youth outcomes. And the governor put together a task force of everyone involved in the juvenile justice system to talk about what we are doing, what we've been doing in Michigan for years, what other states are doing to improve youth outcomes in the juvenile justice system. And that task force came up with a number of recommendations, expanding diversion opportunities for youth who are not a public safety risk, creating a statewide juvenile public defense system and best practice standards, increasing funding for effective community-based programs, including alternatives to incarceration, and tying funding to evidence-based practices, adopting data-driven tools to guide diversion, courts, and detention decisions, strengthening standards and quality assurance for local probation practices and statewide residential programs, and again, expanding data collection to measure system performance, outcomes, and equity. And we're also looking at establishing a statewide advisory board of youth and families impacted by the system to help guide ongoing system improvements. We are working now with the legislature on a very large bill package. And so again, this is an example of collaboration, not just the collaboration that took place on the task force, but all of the collaboration that is taking place afterwards for implementation of all of those task force recommendations. Another example of collaboration that I want to touch on is the collaboration between the Supreme Court and our State Court Administrative Office and Cooley Law School. I'm so pleased that we've partnered with Cooley and the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency on 2 booklets for veteran treatment courts, a judge's manual and a veteran mentor manual. These resources would not have happened without our 3 groups coming together to address the need to help more military veterans in Michigan. My colleagues and I have participated in several mentoring events over the years, along with Cooley through Court of Appeals Judge Michelle Rick and the National Association of Women Judges. Mentoring has been so important in the legal profession for a long time, particularly for women because of the professional relationships and connections that it helps to cultivate. So those are some examples of where we see collaboration. It's happening every day in every aspect of what we're doing in the judiciary to make sure that we're not just sitting back, hearing cases and in treating the judiciary like it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. We're really trying to be thoughtful and realize that what we're here to do is to serve the public, and the best way to do that is to collaborate with everyone that's involved in the judicial branch and make sure that we're responsive to what's being expected and asked of us. So where do you fit into all of this? I think the key message I want you to take away from this discussion today and Law Day is that we can't do any of this work without each and every one of you. We need all of the stakeholders in Michigan's justice system, including law students, our future lawyers and leaders, to be engaged, contributing your experiences, expertise, and ideas. Whether it's access to justice, data transparency, or juvenile justice, my goal is for Michigan to be a national leader, and we need you to help us make that vision a reality.
Thank you, Justice Clement. That was very inspired. As I listened to your words, a few things came to my mind. As someone who teaches criminal law and criminal procedure, one of the first things we talk about in criminal law is that the whole base of our legal system is there are laws by the community that the community is supposed to follow. And then if there are violations, we answer to the community, and the community is supposed to benefit in some way from the punishment that goes out to lawbreakers. And to hear you talk about collaboration with respect to juvenile justice in particular really perked up my ears. Is there an effort underway to collaborate with the educational system along with juvenile justice so that hopefully youth can have a chance, once they've answered for their conduct, that they can go back into society in a law-abiding way and still receive an education and not be cast out at a very young age?
Yeah, so when I think about our justice system, for so long I feel like it's been siloed, where we've talked about the adult criminal system and a juvenile justice system, and then on the early ends of that is our child welfare system. And one of the things that and I don't feel like for so long I don't feel like that the connections have been made between all three parts of our justice system on that side. When I was the liaison for problem solving courts, I visited several courts, and a judge was just on his own tracking and asking participants in the problem solving court. So these are adults that have committed some crime and are now participants in a problem solving court. And he asked them, were you involved, did you ever have interaction with the juvenile justice system? And then he went back even further and asked, were you or your family involved in the child welfare system? And he didn't validate any of this. It was on intake. And the responses that he got was that 89% of adult participants in a problem solving court had been involved in the child welfare system when they were growing up. And the number was almost equally as high for the juvenile justice system. So we know that when you're looking at adults that are struggling so hard to address what those underlying issues are, what that trauma that was caused, years before, we have to do better on the front end. And I'm not just speaking of the child welfare system. Your question was about education, and we have to partner with the education system to make sure that they're not just identifying kids that are at risk, whether they're at risk through the child welfare system or the JJ system, but families that are at risk. And they shouldn't have to come into the court system to get the help that they need. Because what we find is that it's mostly focused on housing. It's related to poverty. I mean, at bottom, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about poverty. And if we can get assistance to families at that early stage, and have those safety nets in place, including education, making sure that even when a family is struggling, that we can get those kiddos, back into school, When you're looking at the juvenile justice system, so many kids that go into residential treatment, that a longer term program don't always have access to the education that a child in a regular school does. And we need to make improvements there, but also we need to get them out of the juvenile justice system and back into the community where there's that community support and they have all of those connections and that safety net in the community. And that includes our education system. So instead of a child, going through the JJ system and then feeling like, okay, that's it. Now I've been, I've got this black mark against me. We need to make sure that we're getting them back into an educational setting so that they have all of the supports and all of the positive things that other children in our education system have.
Thank you. I have a few more follow-up questions for Justice Clement, but while I ask those questions, and if you have questions you would like to ask as well, please drop those in the chat, and we'll get to those questions in just a minute. Justice Clement, I practiced in Kent County, and you probably know Judge Patrick Bowler. He was one of the first judges to implement drug court. And so I had the privilege of seeing that develop from the ground up. And I'm wondering if you can share with our participants the growth of these community-based problem-solving courts and the effect that you see them having on individual lives, part one. And then part two of the question is, do you see the success of these problem-solving courts helping to drive a better understanding that the community has about the need for rehabilitating offenders instead of just casting them aside?
I'm so glad that you brought up Judge Bowler, because that really kicks off my answer to your question, and why it's so important that we have these discussions, and we focus on Law Day, but also those three foundational cornerstones. So 20. It keeps going up. When I started talking about this, it was 15 years. Now it's 20. Over 25 years ago, we had judges that kept seeing the same individuals come through the justice system, and they would put on regular probation. They would sometimes be successful and then go on and then come back through the system, and oftentimes not be successful in probation. And instead of just saying this is the system that we have, and some people go through probation and they never offend again, and some people do, and that we're just going to take that and that's what we're stuck with. We had judges that said this is not working and we have to do something different, and they were innovative and they took a risk, and they started these programs all on their own, and tried to do something different, and it worked. What they tracked the information, they saw individuals coming through getting this intensive assistance. And what they saw is that these people did not come back through the justice system. So then they bring that to the state and they say, hey, we have a model, this works. And it started expanding. And now we have over 203 official courts in Michigan. And I can tell you, everywhere I go, people want to either grow that treatment court, or they want a new treatment court in their county or in their court, because we collect the data and we know that it works. Is the community seeing that? Do they understand? Absolutely. I feel very confident looking at the support that we get from the legislature. Every single legislator that I speak with knows about problem-solving courts, is supportive of them, and constantly wants to help. Do you need more funding? What can we do to support these? Same with the governor. We've always had support from every single governor that we've worked with on problem-solving courts. When you go to communities, they understand that this investment in problem-solving courts is resulting in individuals getting the assistance that they need, so that number one, so they don't reoffend again, right? I mean, that's the goal that the public wants to see, but more importantly, to see and hear from people. I've attended so many court hearings and graduations, and to hear individuals say that if they had not had the opportunity to join one of these programs, that they would be dead. that either they would be dead or someone else would have been, hurt or dead because of their decisions. Hearing from their family members saying, I had given up hope, I didn't know what else I could do. And then seeing them at graduation and having them support their loved one throughout this entire really intensive program and say, this saved our family. This saved, my loved one's life, and it saved our family. And these are not anecdotal. This is every single time I attend one of these. And then you see the support in the community. So, they are truly one of the biggest success stories that we've had over the last, 25 years.
That's wonderful. And the last question I'm going to ask, and then I really do want our participants to have a chance to ask you questions, is we have many law students attending today. Justice Clement, what advice would you give a new lawyer who's getting ready to go out into practice, how they can make these three cornerstones work together: civics, civility, and collaboration?
Yeah, so I love law students. They're full of just like passion and energy. And so what I would say to you is you're gonna go out and you need to have a job, right? Um, I get that. That's why you're in law school, is because you want to practice law. Regardless of where you go and where you practice, you can always give back. You can give back in so many ways to your community. And it doesn't even have to be as a lawyer. It can be as a lawyer. There's a lot of options out there for lawyers to be able to give back, and engage with the systems and people that are interacting with the law. But just remember that even if you go into corporate law, there are so many things that you can do to be engaged. And to me, the best thing that you can do is find mentors. I promise you, lawyers want to help young lawyers, and you're going to know this after you've been practicing for 5, 6, 7 years. You're going to want to help newer lawyers that are coming out of law school and just getting started. Find lawyers, find mentors that can help you see what's out there, what you may have an interest in. When I went to law school, I was planning on going back to state government. I had zero interest in family law or in private practice, but it took one amazing professor who I ended up taking a family law class because it was the first year that topic was going to be on the bar exam. So I was like, oh, I'm going to take this class. And my professor was so incredible. I loved it. She helped me get an internship with legal aid. And here I am, 20 years later. I would have never said that I would have had anything to do with family law, let alone, be in private practice. But this is one of the things that has been consistent throughout my entire career, an area that I've been involved in with child welfare and juvenile justice. And so it's, exposing yourself to things that you may not know anything about or may not know that you have any interest in, and not saying no, trying new things.
Thank you. And just a reminder for those who want to ask questions, please make sure you drop your questions in the chat feature. Justice, we have a question. What are your impressions of civility among the lawyers who appear in the Michigan Supreme Court, including in the tone and content of their briefs?
So we're lucky. We're lucky at the Supreme Court. As you know, in appellate court, we just see lawyers. And the cases that come to us are really far removed from the trial court. So I think that, what we see in oral argument and in brief writing, it's all very positive. Sometimes we see some issues with maybe not a true recitation of the facts, maybe some lawyers taking some liberty, kind of crafting the narrative. But as far as civility, we don't see an issue at the appellate level, at least at the Supreme Court. I talked to a lot of my colleagues that are on the trial court, And we have a lot of work to do there. You know, it's understandable. Lawyers are just by our nature, you know, we're dealing with issues where there's conflict. And we're, you know, it's one side versus another. That is how our justice system has been created, is for there to be two sides. So the natural inclination is for there to be kind of that, you know, that butting of heads. And that's fine. You can be an advocate, you can be a passionate advocate, and you can do it in a way where you are respectful, and uphold what we expect out of lawyers in this profession, and still be an advocate for your client, and treat the court and every single person that you interact with respect.
It all goes back to that civility, doesn't it?
It does.
It does.
And I get it. It can be hard. You know, I mean, you know, I think of my court. We disagree all the time on every, you know, not on every case, but on, you know, all of the cases that make it to oral argument, we disagree. That's one of my favorite parts of the job, is talking to my colleagues, and especially when we disagree, to understand where they're coming from and what their perspective is. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change my mind, but I guarantee you that the opinions that come from our court are better when we have you know, a majority opinion and a dissent or a concurrence, when we're talking to one another and we're doing it in a respectful way, because what comes from the work product that comes from us, I think, is much more understandable for the bench and bar. And so I understand that it can be difficult, but it's one of those things that, you know, if you start your career saying, this is how I'm going to conduct myself as a lawyer, you'll be able to make it through even those most challenging times.
Another question. Obviously, a cornerstone of civics and citizenship responsibilities in our legal system is jury duty. Do you have thoughts about how we might continue to educate our citizens about the important role that citizens play in this capacity, as well as how we value and support those who serve on juries, excuse me?
That's a great question. You know, it's funny. So I was appointed to the court in November of 2017. And like 3 days after I was appointed, I got a jury summons to Ingham Circuit Court. And you know, I was telling, my week that I was called for was my very first week of oral arguments in December. And I was telling people this, and they were like, well, just get out of it. I mean, can't you get out of it? You know, you're on the Supreme Court. I'm like, no, you don't. No, we have it. This is our responsibility. This is our duty. No, I'm not going to get out of it. And they, you know, a lot of people, and some of these were lawyers saying this to me. And I thought, you of all people should know, you know, this is, you know, an honor, right? You know, it's I ended up not getting called. The cases had settled, but I did serve on a jury about probably close to 10 years ago. And I think sharing those experiences and explaining to people why it is so important, it, you know, is one thing that we can do, because it does take a lot of time. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, don't want to do it. But if they understand how it plays into the system that we have, and that again, this is, you know, if someone is going to a jury trial, it's going to be whatever's going on in their life, it's a very, very difficult time. And to know that someone from their community takes that responsibility seriously and is, you know, not just willing to serve, but sees it as their duty to serve, you know, I think gives them confidence in the system that we have in Michigan. And so focusing on the system and how it's intended to work, and making sure that the public knows that their part in that is so important. You know, how do we support people that serve on juries? I don't know the last time that the rate for jury duty, you know, what the pay was increased, because when I served, it was a ridiculous amount of money. I mean, a low amount of money. You know, and for people that work, that have the ability, you know, to be excused from work because they have jury duty, is one thing. With someone that, isn't working or is in school, to be able to take that time off, we really need to make sure that we're supporting those individuals that are being responsible and contributing to our system.
Our next question comes from Professor Martin Scott. She says, our children are our most precious resources, and I have participated in teen court program here in Michigan for over 10 years, and the resources that are allocated to this invaluable program is minimal. We see where the program makes a huge difference, but little resources are allocated to this program. What should we do to fight for the program's survival?
It's a great question, and it's something I talk about often. So here is the perceived problem with teen court or any juvenile court. When we look at statistics for the adult problem-solving courts, we can see a lower recidivism, increased employment. We can see changes in transportation, housing, mental health services, right? We can track all of that, and we can define success based on recidivism. So if someone in an adult treatment court is not coming back through the system, and they're 3 years without recidivating, we say that that's a success. When you look at kids, and you look at the data that was being collected, it was showing that these courts weren't successful. Well, if you've been to any of these courts, you've talked to any of these families or any of the judges or court staff that are working on them, they will tell you the exact opposite. So if you have a kid that is not going to school and now they're going to school twice a week, to me, that's success. We have to redefine what success looks like for these programs and for kids, because kids are going to screw up. They're going to screw up more than adults do. It's because they're young, they're adolescents. Kids that aren't even involved in the justice system make mistakes, and that's part of growing up. That's part of the process. So I think the key is changing our definition of success in teen courts or in anything dealing with youth, and recognizing that the numbers are not going to look the same. We may have kids that are in these programs that maybe are in these programs for a longer period of time, or keep having issues while they're in the program, and instead of saying that they're not successful, looking at what are they doing, where are the improvements, and if we're seeing improvements, then that's a success. And it doesn't fit our typical treatment court model and what you see nationally, but I think it's really important that if we can change that, then we can see support and funding come for those courts.
Thank you. Professor Martin Scott said that was very helpful. I don't know if you can see the chat or
no,
not.
I didn't see it pop up.
She said that was very helpful. Flowing off your answer about the jury duty question, I want to ask, you said something very early on in your remarks about this idea of with rights come responsibilities. And as we've lived past, through the past 3-4 years, it's been a very difficult time for our nation. And we hear a lot of people talking about, well, this is my right, this is my right, this is my right. But a lot of people don't understand or seem to want to talk about the responsibility side of citizenship. Would you like to comment on that and offer any insight into how we can improve that attitude or change the dynamic?
Oh, I wish that I had some good thoughts on how we could improve it. I think we've all seen, over the last more than several years, a lot of divisiveness in our country, and where you see people saying, this is my right, and kind of using that to continue that conflict and fighting. What I don't see is people saying, this is my right, and having that conversation. That I think is what has changed, is that we are so polarized. But the reality is that so many people are not on either end of polarization. They're in the middle, and they want to have these conversations, and they want to get back to a place where people are respecting other people's opinions and perspectives. I feel that of our three branches of government, the judiciary has been able to weather that the best. And I think it's because we've really focused on the judiciary being independent and not, not connected to partisan politics or politics in general. Is that to say that we're successful 100% of the time? No, I mean, I hear stories of things happening in courts that, that I believe, do question the independence of the judiciary. But I feel that on, at least in our branch of government, when people are interacting with the justice system, that the things that we're trying to do, can help build up that understanding of, yes, yes, you may have a right to something, but here's the responsibility that comes along with it, and getting individuals to understand that, be careful to exercise your right, or be careful to talk about this right you have if you're not willing to back up the responsibilities that come with protecting that, or defending that, or being being responsible about that right that you're that you're focusing on. As far as how do we make improvements, I really do feel that that we need, it's about communication. It's about back to civility. People don't want to hear one another and respect one another's opinions, and see really how close they may be and how little they may disagree on. And if they disagree on things, to do it in a way where at least you're understanding where the other person is coming from. And so, I'd like to see us, get back to that point. But I think it's very difficult in today's culture, and with social media and all of that, that I think that there's more of a desire to kind of, to divide people than to bring people together.
Thank you for that. Knowing that you can't see the chat and we're nearing the end of our time together, I do want to read to you an observation that Donna Reed dropped into the chat, and maybe you can take this into your future conversations with strategic planning. But Donna Reed said, with regard to problem-solving courts and looking back at the root causes of why people engage with the criminal justice system, one of the solutions that Canada uses is by integrating lower-income housing within high-income neighborhoods, so that children from these lower income families have the same access to resources such as higher education and extracurricular activities and resources. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to have you hear Ms. Reed's comments as we leave today. But with that, I want to thank everybody for attending today. Justice Clement, your work is invaluable, and we appreciate what you're doing, and we share your observations and thoughts today on this very important law day. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Bill Arnold for some closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Justice Clement, for taking time from your very busy schedule to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
And I think your words and what Tanya shared is a reminder that part of it is when we are busy, we need to take the time to step back to remind ourselves of the cornerstones of our democracy, civics, civility, and collaboration. So thank you for doing that and guiding us in that. I do want to encourage and invite people who are participating to continue your Law Day involvement and support our Cooley Law School clinics today as part of Law Day. That's our one strength here, is our clinics that reach out and collaborate with members of the communities to support those who would not otherwise have access to the law. So please choose your favorite Cooley clinic and make a gift today in support of that. You can find more information at cooley.edu/lawday 2023. And again, thank you, Justice Clement. Thank you all for participating in this Law Day celebration.